Captain Driscoll served with William McKinley during the Civil War, so they're in the line waiting to shake his hands. Driscoll is nervous about the whole thing. From inside the temple came organ music, and the line began to move. "There will be no time to say hello," Captain Driscoll said. "He has a reputation for being astonishingly quick on these kinds of occasions. Before you know it, he's pulled you past with the word hello still stuck to your lips, and he's doing the same to the next fellow. You've got to be quick yourself. We both do." Papa Joe wiped his forehead and cheeks with his handkerchief and nodded. Captain Driscoll continued, "Just ask him if he has read our letter about the aeroplane. I'll do likewise, but we'll address him as Major McKinley. Our time soldiering together should buy us a few more seconds and serious consideration. If Milburn is with him to introduce local leaders, we may be able to linger a moment longer, perhaps long enough to tempt him out to the house for a personal demonstration." Just then the line stopped short. After a few seconds it began to move again, then stopped once more, as if it were a creature of unwieldy size pausing to collect itself every few steps. So it moved for another minute or two, until it began to seem certain that they would reach the doors before the soldiers on either side pushed them shut. Not only would they meet the president, they would get a brief respite from the sun. Then the wait grew unexpectedly long. Papa Joe heard Ben say, "If you can't go faster, at least let us by." Papa Joe glared at the man ahead of Ben, who had been gazing off in the distance when the line started to move again. Having noticed the emptiness in his eyes when he turned and looked up at Ben with an open but wordless mouth, Papa Joe pegged the man as a dim-witted, someone who had trouble remembering his name or where he was. Wouldn't it be just their misfortune to be kept from the president by the inaction of a fool? But when he saw the man mop his own brow with a white handkerchief wrapped around an injured hand, he admonished himself for his lack of charity. This poor fellow was suffering in the heat as much as anyone else. The closer they came to the doors, the more inviting and cool the interior looked. Then they were moving inside, into what Papa Joe thought must be a drop in temperature of 10 or more degrees. Momentarily, as he took off his hat, he shivered, as if he were stepping into a tin-lined ice house and not an ornate concert hall. When his eyes adjusted to the change in brightness, he saw Essie, Pearl, and Ben ahead of him. Also, he saw soldiers and policemen on either side of the aisle, and above the organist's efforts heard somebody bark, "Get in line!" At first he thought the guard had snapped at Ben, and he realized the order had been directed to someone who had stepped too far to one side as if trying to get an early view of the president. Papa Joe was grateful that he did not need to get out of line to get a good look ahead. He was tall enough to see over the heads of just about anyone in front of him except Ben. Papa Joe swallowed at the sight of William McKinley in black frock coat and trousers and immaculate white waistcoat and collar, smiling and shaking hands. Another shiver rolled through him, and to his surprise his eyes moistened. To think, he had begun life as a slave, and now, after 50 years of stolen freedom, he was just footsteps away from clasping the hand of the President of the United States. Even if he had not been here for a higher purpose, the emotion of the moment would have overwhelmed him. "Milburn is with him," Captain Driscoll said, caught up in his own emotions. Papa Joe glanced back at the captain, who must have seen the tears forming, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "We are almost there, Joseph, so close to success that I can taste it. Can you taste it?" Yes, he could taste it, like raw honey clinging to the tip of his tongue. Just then there was some kind of disturbance ahead. One of the plainclothesmen, a large man with silvery hair, had crossed the aisle to intercept someone in line, a short, heavy man in the coarse garb of an immigrant worker. The detective grasped it by his shoulders and seemed to peer into his face before inspecting his hands. Papa Joe believed the handling was rough enough to have resulted in a scuffle if there had been the slightest resistance, but this luckless man looked appropriately terrified and raised his arms willingly to let the detective's hands slide inside his coat. Evidently satisfied that his prey was harmless, the detective retreated across the aisle and waved him forward. His trembling visible to those behind him, the worker reached for the president's outstretched hand. Papa Joe noticed that to his left, near the plainclothesman across from the president, stood Captain Liz Babcock, a young lawyer who was exposition grand marshal and one of the blacksmith shop's best customers. In fact, it was Babcock's recommendation that landed Gus his job. Gus had long since sent a beautiful letter to express his gratitude, and Papa Joe had thanked Captain Babcock personally during a shoeing. Now he hoped to catch his eye and raise a hand in greeting. And as this idea arose, the opportunity presented itself. Nodding at another man beside the president, Babcock turned and started past the line, perhaps on his way to close the doors, Papa Joe thought, relieved they had made it inside. Beginning to smile, he was about to murmur hello to the passing grand marshal. Then he heard the first shot. Papa Joe flinched, something congealing in his throat. His eyes locked with Babcock's for the smallest fraction of a second, then snapped forward. Full comprehension of the horror taking shape before him took less than a heartbeat. A second shot broke the ephemeral silence that followed the first, and a flaming kerchief fluttered to the floor. The man ahead of Ben was dropping into a shooter's crouch within a foot of the president, whose hands had flown to his chest as he rose on the balls of his feet. Ben's right arm was cocked, his fist above his shoulder. As he swung downward at the head of the assassin, one of the soldiers and one of the detectives dove toward them. All four men went down amid shouts and screams and the sudden cessation of organ music. The line, so orderly before the gunshots, instantly broke apart as people scrambled to get out of the way or see what was happening. Arms flailing, more soldiers piled onto Ben and the other three. Someone shouted, "Al, get his gun!" Meanwhile, President McKinley, a jagged rose taking shape in the center of his white waistcoat, slumped into the arms of the man behind him. Eased into a chair, he wheezed, "My wife, be careful, Cordy, how you tell her. Oh, be careful." Papa Joe thought, my God. I don't know how you want to set up the signing up, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I just want to recognize Gary. Hi, everyone. It is not every day that you write a novel, and this is a very special book signing, and that's why I'm here. I have a proclamation that I'd like to present to Gary at this time, whereas Gary Earl Ross will introduce his first novel, Blackbird Rising, a novel of the American spirit, at a book signing tonight, July 29th, 2009, at Talking Leaves Bookstore. And whereas at the dawn of the 20th century, the first city lit by electricity, Buffalo, New York, hosts a dazzling World's Fair to showcase America's march into the future. Unknown to organizers, the bold grandsons of a runaway slave plan to conquer the sky during a fateful presidential visit. They intend to show the world that nothing is more powerful than mankind's oldest dreams, flight and freedom, meeting imagination in an age of possibility. And whereas Blackbird Rising encompasses the plight of African Americans, the challenge of aviation, the celebration of the world's progress, and a president's assassination. And whereas Gary Earl Ross is a professor at the University at Buffalo Equal Opportunity Center, in addition, he is a fiction writer, public radio essayist, a playwright in residence for the Ujima Company, and whereas Gary Earl Ross is the author of short story collections, The Wheel of Desire and Shimmerville, and the plays Picture Perfect, The Best Woman, and Matter of Intent. Matter of Intent won him an Edgar Award from Mystery Writers of America and is currently in production in London, England. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Byron W. Brown, Mayor of the City of Buffalo, do hereby proclaim July 29th, 2009 as Gary Earl Ross Day.